Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and Happy Hanukkah. Now, let's get right down to it. First of all, let's talk a little bit about Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? What does Hanukkah mean? It means dedication. So, back in the days, about 100, 200 years or so before the turn of the millennium, when we went from BCE to CE on the civil calendar, we had the Greeks. Okay, a Greek offshoot was ruling Judea. It was first conquered by Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great had basically conquered the known world. And it's interesting why he left Judea alone. He had a dream about a rabbi, believe it or not. When he came into Judea, he met that rabbi, thought it was an omen that he had seen the guy in a dream, and basically left Judea alone. Okay? Fast forward 300 years, or a few hundred years, Alexander's long gone. We've got a succession of leaders, and basically you have the Seleucids, who were really Assyrians. They were Greek. They were a Greek offshoot, and the Egyptians basically fighting for Judea, which was kind of right in the middle. And it seemed like the Seleucids were starting to take over that land, and they wanted to come in. They were pagans. They wanted to put statues of gods in the temple. This was the first case. The Romans, of course, would want to do it again. They wanted to Hellenize the Judeans. How can I say this? The Greeks were not modest people. Okay, they liked to work out in the nude. And they also believed in homosexuality, which of course was completely against the tenets of Judaism. We're more modest people. We don't pretty much, we were sticking to heterosexual relationships. And also, of course, we believed in the one God, not the stable of pagan gods that they believed in. So after a time, after a few hundred years or so of this rule, the Hasmonean dynasty, that was Mattatyahu, who was the head priest, and his sons, Judah and them, called the Maccabees. They led a revolt. They were finally able, after about 20 years, to overthrow the Seleucids, the Greeks, and they were able to restore the temple. The temple, of course, was kind of wrecked. It was in shambles, had some issues, and they went to rebuild it. They went to restore it. And when they got to the oil was only enough to last for 8 days. For 1 day, rather, I'm sorry. Now, the menorah, the temple menorah, was a 7-stemmed menorah. And they would light it each day with the oil, then the oil would run out, then they replenish it. And they only had enough oil for 1 day, but they lit it anyway. The oil miraculously lasted for 8 days. If you remember a Saturday Night Live skit years ago, Gilda Radner, she was Jewish when she was on. She was doing the Hanukkah story. They were flashing back with John Belushi being Judah the Maccabee. He's sitting there and they're all watching, and they said, wow, it's lasted for 8 days. Must be a big miracle. And he turns to one of the guys on the left and goes, you name the holiday Hanukkah, like it was the guy's name. So, kind of a funny way. But Hanukkah, again, means dedication. I spell it Hanukkah. Of course, it's a Hebrew word. We're trying to spell it with English letters, and there's different ways to do it. So basically, take your pick. Okay, so now we're at the Torah portion of Miketz, all right? And it's really interesting in two ways. Somebody told me that if you look at this Torah portion, there are vavs that start every single verse except 7 or 8 of the verses. Vav means and. And a lot of times a verse will start with va, which is kind of a connection. So vav means hook. And you see this later on in Exodus when they talk about the tabernacle. Avav, they use vavim, it's a hook, but it also joins two things. So vav is and. And of course the implications is that the vav are like Hanukkah candles, and they represent the ones that aren't, that the verses that don't start with vav represent the candles of menorah. So there's kind of, beside that, there's kind of a real life type of a connection between the two portions. Because here we have the redemption of Joseph. And Joseph becomes the vizier of Egypt. The vizier, he's like the viceroy, the second in command of Pharaoh, because Pharaoh has these dreams. And he has 2 dreams that he's standing on the banks of the Nile. And remember, the Egyptians thought the Nile was kind of a god. And he's standing because, in paganry, men believe that he can control the gods. We as Jews, monotheistic, we believe that God is, the last say, the final arbiter of everything. So he's out there, and 7 full cows come up from the shores. and they're full and plump, and then 7 scraggly cows come up and eat the other cows, and nothing's changed with the cows. You'd think that after eating each cow they'd be plump, and they weren't. They still remained kind of thin and shabby and depraved looking. So he wakes up and he's like, wow, what a dream. Goes to sleep again, and again has another dream. 7 ears of corn, full and plenty. Next to them grow up 7 other ears that are just, withered, but they overtake. They eat they encompass the other healthy ears of corn, and it's left like that. It's like the other ears of corn haven't benefited by encompassing the other ears. So all of the magicians, all of his courtiers, they couldn't really interpret it. They all had different meanings. They thought maybe it was his daughters. And then the chamberlain, it's been 2 years since Joseph had interpreted the dreams correctly of the cupbearer and of the baker. And he says, wow, 2 years ago there was this Hebrew youth in prison, and, me and the baker had dreams, and, he correctly interpreted the dream of the baker that he would be executed, and he also dreamed that I would be restored to my position as I have, and Pharaoh's like, well, send for him then. And they come, and Pharaoh tells Joseph his dreams, and Joseph says, no, it is not I that will interpret the dreams. I will get a message from Hashem, our God. And he tells Pharaoh, he goes, okay, Hashem has told Pharaoh what's going to happen. He has also given him a way to deal with the situation. Now, it's kind of impudent for a commoner, especially a foreigner, to tell the king, the Pharaoh, what he needs to do to alleviate the situation. But he couched it in such a way that, that's contained within the message of the dream. And here's the message of the dream. There will be 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. So, what Pharaoh needs to do is to start storing grain and make sure we have enough for those 7 years of famine to go through that. And Pharaoh's impressed. He's like, wow, and Joseph also says, and you need to appoint somebody who's going to oversee this. And Pharaoh says, look, you interpreted the dream, you do it. You're going to be the person who's going to oversee all this. Here's my ring, my signet ring, to show that only Pharaoh has more power than you. So Joseph starts to organize, and they have the 7 years of plenty, and as you would imagine, after 7 years of plenty, as it came to pass, you start having a couple of years of famine. Now, with Joseph, okay, it would have been politically incorrect at that time for a xenophobic society, to put a foreigner in charge of all this. So what does Pharaoh do? He gives him another name, a new name that's Egyptian, and of course dresses Joseph up. He's got his ring, he's got his little cane and stuff, and has a new name. He marries Potiphar's daughter, has 2 kids on his own, and now he's in charge. Well, word spreads across the rest of the Near East, or the Middle East, that's also involved in this famine, because it was the weather and it was widespread. And Jacob hears that Egypt has grain, sends his sons to Egypt to bargain for grain. So they go to Egypt, and they're in the court of who would you think? Joseph. Joseph recognizes them. They don't recognize Joseph. He's got a full beard. He's got his hair's long. He's adorned in jewelry and new clothes. Got a different name. And Joseph sees him, and he, well, has anything changed? So he kind of quizzes him a little bit. How you doing? You came here, and the brothers start offering up new information. Well, we have a father at home. There's us, and we have a brother that disappeared. Oh, your brother disappeared, huh? And we've got another brother at home. Oh, really? Why didn't he come? Well, the father's worried because his brother from that mother, didn't come. Says, oh, okay. And, gives them grain, but he plants some stuff in their package, right? He wants to see how sincere they are. So first he accuses them of being spies, okay? And he says, okay, I'm going to keep all of you. And then they say, no, trust us, we'll come back. He says, okay, leave one of your brothers as tribute. You, Simeon. That was the one that wanted to, kill Joseph, right? So they take him. He sends them home with the grain and stuff. And what happens? They open up their sacks when they get home. What do they see? They see his goblet, his favorite goblet, And they're like, oh my gosh, we can't, what do we do? And Jacob's like, well, he wants to see the other brother. He wants to see Benjamin. And Jacob's like, no, I'm not going to risk him. No, that's it. So everything remains copacetic. Shimon is still in prison, and more time goes by, and they run out of the grain. They need more grain, so he sends them back. And Joseph's like, weren't you the guys that took my goblet? Oh, no, we didn't know, but here's a goblet, and here's all the money, the extra money. You put our money back, and here's the extra money, to pay for that, and we're repaying it, right? So Joseph quizzes them again, okay? And what does he really want to do, okay? He wants to make sure that they're sincere. He wants to see if they're really repentant, and they are, and they are. And the reason they came back is Judah said to Jacob, if you let Benjamin come with us to free Shimon and get more grain, I will personally take responsibility. Okay? So what happens? So Joseph sets them up again, gives them a banquet and stacks their sacks, but he puts some other stuff in there too. And that's when the story is going to continue next week for next Parsha. So we hope happy Hanukkah for everybody. We've got services on Friday night, and we have services on Saturday. Saturday night, we're having a big Hanukkah party. Come on out. It's going to be fun. We hope to see you there. Meanwhile, Shabbat Shalom, and thanks for listening.